Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Today I've got an unboxing and overview of the ASUS X99-A 2 motherboard. I've previously reviewed this board's predecessor, link to that in the description below, but this is the new updated version for Broadwell-E, and right here I've got the Broadwell-E i7-6800K processor, just to simply show you what should go into this motherboard. Now, why should you consider this motherboard? Why should you care? If you are looking to step up above Skylake, if you want to go above the general consumer line, which either has 2 or 4 processing cores, and you want to consider going to something that has more, which in this case has 6 cores, then this is the motherboard I think you should look at. There are X99 motherboards that cost less than this. There are X99 motherboards that cost more than this. But for $250, which is what this cost on the day I shot this, I think you get a lot of bang for your buck. I think you get a lot of performance for the money. You get a lot of features for the money. There are X99 boards that cost over $500. They're nice, they contain every feature you can imagine, but for most people they're terrible overkill, and they mostly exist as what's called halo products. They're just for people who go, oh, what's the most expensive? That must be the best, I'll buy that one. Yeah, they don't add all that much, and they're more than double the cost of this motherboard. Now, there are motherboards that cost less than this, some of them down in the $170 to $180 range. But you really start to give up some things when you drop down to that level, and I wouldn't recommend it. If you're considering spending $420 on your processor and nearly $2,000 on your entire computer, which is what the machine should cost if you're considering this, $250 is pretty reasonable for a motherboard. Now, I'm going to open this up, show you all the features of the board in detail. I'm going to cover all the connections, all the ports, and all the plugs. But let me just say that in terms of overall value, this is what I think you should look at. Go check it out in the video description below. There'll be links to both Amazon and NewEgg for this motherboard. Buy it wherever it's cheapest. But by all means, if you're going to buy an X99 motherboard, I strongly recommend you look at this one rather than any of the others that cost more or less. Now, let's take a look at what's inside the box. And don't worry, we'll talk about all the features once we have the board out. Now, when we open up the box, you'll see that it's packaged like any other motherboard is. Some of the higher-end motherboards have fancier packaging, but you're just paying for a fancy box. You essentially have a large anti-static bag and a cardboard spacer to hold it in. And let me take this out of here. Briefly, let me cover what's in the box because it's not actually that much. We'll take the cardboard spacer out. There are, come to that in a minute. Oh, that's the USB 3. There are 1, 2, 3, they give you four serial ATA cables. Those aren't terribly expensive these days. I'd like to see 6 in a motherboard at this price range, but they give you 4 serial ATA cables. They give you a CPU installation tool. This is for help installing the processor to make sure you don't break it. That's always nice to have. They provide you with a very nice I/O shield. This goes into your computer case. This snaps in. All the external ports accessible go through it. And this is actually really nice. You probably can't see it, but it's nicely screen printed on here with a stylized design, and all the ports are labeled. So if you're just looking at the back of your machine, you can see what all the ports are. That's nicer than most. This is very important. They provide the M.2 slot screw for an M.2 solid-state drive. There is an M.2 slot on here for installing an M.2. It's a small card-size solid-state drive, and it's certainly something to consider if you're at this price level and you're building this kind of machine. These are not provided with the drives. They have to come with the motherboard, so save this. Even if you don't use it when you first build the machine, if you want to add one later, you'll need it. This is just a handy installation assistance tool for plugging in the small connectors from the front of your computer case, your power switch, hard drive activity light, reset switch, those small cables in the front of your computer case. This just lets you plug them in here where it's easy to see what you're doing, and then you just plug this whole thing into the motherboard. It doesn't do anything other than make it easier to install your cables, but it's nice to have. It's a nice handy tool. This is a NVIDIA SLI bridge. which generally is not going to be used much anymore because the new 10 series cards have a new high bandwidth bridge you use. So if you're getting one of the new 1000 series GTX cards, the 1070 or the 1080, you're not going to use that anyway. If you have an older card like a 970 or a 980, you can use that. And this, I believe, is a, what is that? This is new. I think this is a Type-C cable, but I could be mistaken. No? That might be for the lighting. I think that is for the lighting. All right, I'll come back to that in a minute. That's new. That wasn't in the older X99 board. And then we have ASUS's typical excellent manual. ASUS does excellent manuals. This is not a small pamphlet done in 10 different languages. This is all in English, and they cover in detail every single plug and every single port on this motherboard, all the BIOS settings. I've used Gigabyte motherboards. I've used MSI motherboards. Honestly, I think ASUS does the best manuals in the business. My opinion, but they do great manuals. If you want to know what everything on the board is, there you go. They also provide a driver CD, which honestly you shouldn't use. You should be going to ASUS's website and downloading the updated drivers, including the automatic overclocking software with their ASUS AI Suite 3, I think it's called. And that software will let you overclock this by simply running a Windows program. It'll start at a base speed, and it'll ramp up the clock rate slowly until basically it crashes while stress testing your machine, and then it will back it off a bit and then find the best performance you can get out of your processor in your case. And that's all there is to the inside of the inside of the box. Enough of that. Let's get to the motherboard. This is a big, heavy board, which it should be for $250. Take that out of the plastic, set that over there. Take a look at that. How nice is that? That is a huge motherboard. I love it. Now, there's a couple of nice upgrades to this board. Let me take the plastic off of this. Put that in my plastic pile. There are several nice upgrades to this board that are brand new for this board. Now, first of all, if you look at the first PCI Express slot down here, there's actually a metal bracket around it. That is a strength bracket designed to provide protection for inserting and removing graphics cards. It's a new thing that ASUS is doing that provides reinforcement to reduce the risk of damaging the motherboard or breaking the graphics card slot. If you're putting in a big, heavy, overclocked graphics card, a big double or triple slot wide heavy graphics card, that provides reinforcement for the motherboard, reducing the chance that you damage the slot on your motherboard. That's nice. You've got 8 memory slots. Now, many of these features are standard for X99 boards, but I'll cover them anyway. You have 8 memory slots, 4 on each side. You have quad channel memory, so you want to make sure that you install memory in pairs of 4, which not really a pair, that's a quad of 4, but in sets of 4. You can install either 4 modules or 8. I wouldn't do any other combination other than 4 or 8. So fill all the gray slots first or all the black slots. Don't put all on one side. You want to populate the channel. This motherboard will support up to 128 gigs of RAM. I reckon most of you will not need 128 gigs. That's expensive and overkill for most people. 32 gigabytes is probably the sweet spot for a 6-core processor and a motherboard at this price point. And at the moment, that's what I would recommend. 64 is an option, 32 is recommended. If you only need 16, I would question whether or not you need a 6-core processor in the first place, because if you're running only 1 or 2 programs, then you don't need a 6-core chip. But 32 or 64, and populate them in alternating memory slots. This, by the way, is actually really nice. This is not decoration. This is actually a heavy heat sink up here. It's not just for decoration. I'm holding it because it's actually a big piece of metal that is bolted into the board, and there's another one here. Now, this white on the top is just a plastic cover, but underneath it is actually a heavy metal heat sink. So there are good heat sinks. They're lined up here with the voltage regulators to provide cooling for the memory transfer. There's capacitors all around. Oh, this is interesting. There is, I could be mistaken. I don't think this was on the older X99. There are two CPU power connectors here. There is an 8-pin CPU plug and a 4-pin. There are power supplies that have two. You need a fairly decent power supply to have a power supply that has two. Your basic 500-watt power supply is not going to provide you with two CPU power connectors. But if you're at this level of computer, you should probably be on maybe a 750 to an 850-watt power supply. 1,000-watt is fairly overkill unless you're going with two high-end graphics cards. But, you know, an 850-watt power supply wouldn't go astray. Over here, you have your main 24-pin PCI, not PCI, I keep saying PCI. That's your main ATX power connector. That provides the motherboard power from your power supply. Moving down, we have a chassis fan header right here, and we have a USB 3 header. If your case has USB ports on the front, and they're the blue ones, that's where you're going to plug them into right there. And there's a second one right down here on the bottom of the board. So if you have a computer case that has 4 USB 3 ports on the front, no worries. Plug one cable in here and one cable in here, and you are all set. There are also, two USB 2 headers down here. So maybe you have a case. My current recommendation for a case is the Corsair Obsidian Series 750D. I've previously reviewed it. My personal machine at home is built in it. It is an awesome case to work with. There are 2 USB 2 and 2 USB 3 ports on the front of that case. No worries. Plug one cable in here and one cable in there and you're good to go. The other reason this is important is if you have a liquid cooler that uses a USB header, such as Corsair's H100i or H115i liquid cooler, as I'm going to be installing on this, those have actually the ability to control and monitor the pump from within Windows. But the cable that comes out of the pump header is a USB 2 connector and has to be plugged into it. So you need a motherboard that has a USB 2 plug as well as the USB 3 plugs. Now, moving on, let me turn it on the side for the moment. We'll cover the whole side. I mentioned in the comparison video with the older version of this motherboard. This now has a U2 port, which is right here. This U2 port will allow you to run future, which I don't believe exists yet, NVMe external, not external to the computer, but external to the motherboard, solid-state drives. So if you don't add one today to the M.2 slot, which is on the motherboard, you can in the future add one to the U2 port. Note, you cannot use both the U2 port and the M.2 slot at the same time. Pick one. So you're limited to one or the other. You have got a single PCI, not PCI Express, SATA Express, Serial ATA Express connector, which Serial ATA Express is one of those things they planned on using and then never really happened. There might be a few devices that use it, but basically everybody skipped it. Now, that being said, you can still use those as a pair of Serial ATA connectors. And doing so, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 6 gigabit Serial ATA ports. That's a lot. That is 10 drives. You know, I'm sure somebody out there needs more drives than that, but honestly, if you need more than 10 drives plugged in, you probably have a server, and you might want to consider, I don't know, you'll probably end up with an add-in RAID card if you have more than 10 drives. That's a lot of drives. So that's what's along the edge right there. There is another chassis fan header along the bottom, right here. So if your case has a lot of fans, not to worry. There's a lot of headers. There's one here, there's one here. These ports right down in the very bottom corner is what I was talking about with that handy installation tool. That is where you plug in power switch, reset switch, hard drive activity light, etc. from the front of your case. All goes down here. Once this is inside your case, they may be hard to reach. It's easier to use that tool, and then that whole tool slides on there. Easy, no worries. What else is down here? There is the, oh, this is nice. There is an XMP switch down here, which most of you should not have to use, but they provide it just because people complain. DDR4 memory, which is what gets installed here, double data rate version 4 memory. The standard default speed is 2,133 megahertz. Most of you will not be installing memory at that speed in this board because it's now not that expensive to get 3000 megahertz DDR4. The cost difference is not a huge jump, and you're getting almost a 50% memory speed boost. Faster RAM doesn't matter for gaming and general Windows use, but if you're buying a platform like this and you're doing video rendering, it does make a difference. You can get an extra 10% video render speed out of 50% faster RAM. That's nice, especially if it's only maybe an extra, $30 to $50 to get 3000 or even 3200 megahertz RAM. But that RAM will not run at that faster speed unless you go into the system BIOS and manually set it, either using the XMP or Extreme Memory Profile or manually adjust the settings. The other option you have down here is to flip that switch. This switch down here forces it to use the XMP profile. What is XMP? XMP is an Intel technology called Extreme Memory Profile that Intel came out with to help memory companies make uniform high-speed memory that is easier for end users and consumers to overclock to run at the higher rated speeds. Essentially, there is actually information stored on the memory modules. If you buy a memory module that's XMP compatible, there's actually information stored on the module that tells the motherboard what it is. It self-identifies. So if you plug in XMP memory and you flip that switch, what it does is it tells the motherboard to ignore the system BIOS settings, the basic input-output settings, and just use whatever the memory says it is. If the memory says it's 3000 megahertz, run it at 3000 regardless of what you set up in the BIOS. It's a nice feature because sometimes just flipping a switch is easier than going in and messing with settings. The downside to that is if you want to overclock higher, like say you buy 3000 megahertz memory and you say, you know what, I want to try running it at 3200. Well, you can't because that'll override it. You'll have to turn that off and then go into the BIOS and manually adjust the settings. What else is down here? I mentioned the M.2 slot before. There are a number of M.2 drives available on the market, both the older style, which run at 6 gigabit per second, which is the serial ATA speed, and the newer NVMe drives, which run at 32 gigabits per second and are much, much faster. Simple example, a Samsung 850 EVO can be purchased in either a 2.5-inch drive that plugs into the serial ATA ports, or it can be purchased in an M.2 drive, which will fit, it's about this long and fits right there against the motherboard. It just fits flat. It plugs into that socket and screws into that screw. If you buy the 850 EVO M.2 drive, it's no faster or slower than the 2.5-inch drive version. It's just convenient because you can plug it into the motherboard and leave it and not worry about using a serial ATA port. But it's the same speed. The NVMe drive is the Samsung 950 Pro, and it's twice as expensive as the 850 EVO. But it's up to 5 times as fast in read speed and 4 times as fast in write speed. Instead of being capped at about 550 megabytes per second read speed, which the 850 EVO is, the 950 Pro will read at up to 2.5 gigabytes per second. Yeah, that's 5 times as fast, well, close to it. Now, of course, it depends on your workload as to whether that will actually benefit you or make a difference in any way, shape, or form. But if you are a heavy multitasker, if you're doing 3D animation or video rendering, it might be worth buying one to use as a scratch drive or a boot drive or a temporary file storage drive for large images because of the fast read and write speed. So that's what the M.2 slot is. Moving over, we have got a battery, of course, for keeping your date and time and BIOS settings. Along the bottom is a little LED indicator, which basically is an error code. Inside the user manual, in the back of this, if you plug everything in, if you build your system and you turn it on and the system doesn't boot, oh, great, now what? What's wrong? Wherever the system failed, a code will appear on this 2-digit display. That will correspond to a table that's inside your book. What that helps you with is your RAM not installed correctly? Does it not detect a graphics card? Is the power not plugged in properly? Is there a fault with the motherboard? Does it not detect the CPU properly? It helps you figure out what's wrong with your system. Not all motherboards included. It's really nice to have when you're building a high-end system. If it does not boot for any reason, oh great, why? It gives you a place to start with. Next to it are power switch and reset switch buttons. If you are messing around with your system either outside of a computer case or you haven't hooked everything up yet, it can be helpful. I personally have never used these because I don't turn my system on until everything's plugged in and ready to go, but some people like to have them. Next to that is, that's where it is, RGB header. That's what this cable is for. I'll be honest and tell you, I'll tell you I don't know what the other end is going to go to at the moment. This motherboard includes full RGB lighting. I don't know how much of it lights up at the moment because I haven't turned it on and powered it up yet. I am going to try and figure out how to do a build video with this where I can show off the beauty of the lighting system, because this, you can do all sorts of color patterns, 16.7 million colors. You can have it be a static color. You can have it be a breathing color. You can have the color change based upon CPU temperature, workload, a variety of factors. There's a bunch of options for how to control the color. This is a header which connects to possibly external lighting, maybe if you have case lighting. I'm not a big case lighting fan, but I'm going to do something with case lighting since, you know, it's becoming popular. Next to it, what is this port? This is a COM port. You probably will never use this. Do you need a serial port? The old school serial port. Fair enough, they provide one. If this is a header, you can buy something that will plug into the back of your case, into one of the drive bay slots in the back of your case, plug it in here, it'll give you a COM port, a serial port. I haven't used a serial port in over 10 years, but somebody out there needs one. There you go. Next to it is the audio header. Does your computer case have microphone and headphone jacks on the front of your case? That's where the plug is going to plug. The front of your case will have a cable. It'll go right there. Over here we have our fancy CrystalSound 3 sound chip. It's a Realtek AC-1050, I think. It's a Realtek sound chip with fancy branding, but it works well enough, and it's sitting over there with capacitors to try to make it sound better. That's fine. PCI slots. We don't have any old school PCI slots, but we have 4 PCI X16 Express slots, and we have 2 PCI 1X slots. Now, I will tell you that only 2 of these slots are actually wired electrically as X16 slots. The other 2 are wired as 4X slots. In other words, these 2 slots right here that I've got my fingers on are actually X16 slots. They have the internal pins running the full length. If you're going to run 2 graphics cards, for example, 2 NVIDIA cards such as 2 GTX 1080s, or you want to run 2 high-end AMD cards in Crossfire, no worries. You would plug them into these 2 slots because these 2 are fully wired all the way to the end. These 2 X16 slots are not. You can't see it, but the internal wires actually stop halfway in the slot. There's nothing inside the slot the rest of the distance. The reason the full slot is there is so you can plug in a full-size card. Cards are backwards compatible and will auto-detect. You can plug in a video card into one of these slots, and it will work in 4X mode. For example, this motherboard supports 3-way SLI and 4-way Crossfire. You could absolutely plug in 4 video cards if you want to. Just keep in mind, they're not all going to work at 16X. I don't recommend that in any way, shape, or form. 2 video cards is the most anyone should do. You run into all kinds of problems trying to do more than 2. So you'll put a video card here, and if you want a second one, you'll do it in the 3rd slot, skipping the 2nd slot. What else is on here? There is another fan header right here, and this one actually says high amperage fan. So if you have a large high power draw fan, that's where you want to plug it. That fan connector will provide extra power for a high powered fan. And up at the top of the board back here, in fact I'll turn it vertical so I can say top of the board, there are 3 more fan headers, including the CPU one, which is that one. Nope, the middle one. Okay, up at the top here, there are 3 CPU headers. The one on your left here is the water pump header. This is a high amperage header designed to run your water cooler. This motherboard's designed for a water cooler. If you're buying a $420 processor and a $250 motherboard, and you're not spending $100 to $120 on liquid cooling, in my opinion, you missed something along the way. It deserves it. That's the only thing that should go on here. It even says screen printed right on here, water pump. It's meant for that. So you put your water pump here, your main CPU fan here, and if you have a large one such as an H115i 280 millimeter dual fan Corsair, which is what I'm going to be putting on this, you'll have two fans that need to be plugged in, and that'll go into these because it's CPU optional. It'll recognize those two as both being CPU fans with the water pump next to it. That leaves you with one, let me find them. 1, 2, 3. Is that all of them? That might be all of them. Okay, so that leaves you with 3 additional fan headers for case fans. If you have an additional exhaust fan in the back and maybe 2 intake fans in the front, you're all set. If you have more fans than that, you can get for less than $5 on Amazon a very inexpensive splitter cable that will split one of these fan header cables into 2 and let you run 2 fans off of it. So no big deal. What else is on this board? I mentioned the RAM slots, I mentioned the CPU. Of course, you've got the big CPU socket in the center, which is fairly self-evident. Let's talk about the ports on the back. I know this seems like a lot, but the whole purpose of this video is to talk about all the features in detail so that you know what you're getting. This is the BIOS flashback switch. If by chance you want to update the BIOS and you don't have a processor in it, maybe you're watching this video 6 months from now and some newer chip comes out, or a year from now and a newer chip comes out that will work in this board but needs an updated BIOS, you can actually plug a USB thumb drive with ASUS's updated BIOS file. You have to download it on a different computer, but you plug that in and you power it up, you plug in power, no CPU, and push that button. That will tell the motherboard to read the BIOS file off the USB thumb drive and update the BIOS without you needing a processor. You can then install whatever the new processor is and you're good to go. It's a nice feature. You probably will never use it, but it's nice to have. We have an old school PS2 combo port for keyboard or mouse. It's a dual port. It'll work for either keyboard or mouse. Again, most of you will never use this either, but there's a few people out there that have a device that needs a PS2 port. You have one in case you need it. There are 4 USB 2.0 ports here on the back. Why USB 2? 2 is old, right? 2's been around for over a decade. Yes, that's true, but keep in mind, keyboard, mouse, webcam, speakers, printer, none of those devices require a USB 3. All of those devices work great on USB 2. Most people are going to end up with at least probably 3 devices that are USB 2, if not 4 or more. Many devices are USB 2. There's no reason to make everything USB 3. So those USB 2 devices are for those sorts of things. Next to it are 4 USB 3 devices, super speed 5 gigabit ports. Now, what do you plug into there? Flash drives, hard drives, anything that needs high-speed data. Above that is an Intel, a genuine Intel gigabit Ethernet networking port. At this level, you're never going to find anything but Intel. They currently make the best, because really the only 2 networking chips on the market at the moment are Realtek and Intel. Cheap motherboards have Realtek, expensive motherboards have Intel. Intel uses less CPU, it's more compatible, it's just a better choice. So you have the good stuff. Next to the 4 USB 3 ports, you have 2 USB 3.1 ports. These are the new 10 gigabit super speed ports. That is incredibly fast. These are brand new. You have 2 of them, and there's 2 different types. The top one, the turquoise port, is a Type A port. That's the same port you've been using for 15 plus years. It's the same as the USB 2, same as USB 3. That's the turquoise port. The one below it is the new Type C. It's smaller, and it's reversible. You can insert it either way. There are not a lot of Type C devices out there, but there are more every day coming out, and it's nice to have one. Next to that, we have our audio ports, including our optical out. So you have the options of 8-channel, high definition, super surround, everything you could possibly want sound. These ports are auto-configurable. Basically, plug the stuff in wherever you want, and it's usually pretty smart and figures it out. They are labeled, but I always plug my speakers in the green one because that's where they go. Although many speakers are now going to USB digital speakers, so audio cards may go by the wayside at some point if everybody keeps going to USB speakers. So that's all the ports on the back. Of course, all those USB ports are in addition to the 8 USB ports the system supports on the headers on the board, 4 USB 2, 4 USB 3 for the front of the case, or for adapters going out the back. This is a very fully featured board. Now, I mentioned this board has lighting, LED lighting. It's not powered. I can't show it to you right now. I honestly can't tell you how much of it lights up because I've never used it. However, it is my intention when I do the build video with this to do some type of demonstration on that so you can see what it looks like. If you're the kind of person who cares, who buys a video card with LED lighting, who wants a motherboard, who maybe puts lighting in your case because you want something that looks nice, that's fine. I know many people do. I've seen many pictures and videos of people doing awesome builds that are beautiful. This motherboard gives you all those choices with software to run in Windows. You can configure it many ways. It's great. $250. Basically every feature you need. Now, some people are going to say, you didn't mention Wi-Fi. That's correct. It doesn't have Wi-Fi. First of all, the more expensive boards, the $400 boards, do have Wi-Fi. But you don't need to spend that much money to get Wi-Fi. For $20, you can buy a USB adapter that provides you with AC Wi-Fi at up to 450 megabits per second, which is fast enough for most people. You can get, for $35, an adapter with large external antennas if you care about the size of the antenna. Honestly, for a machine of this caliber, I hope you're using the gigabit wired connection. You'll get better latency, better transfer rates, but if you've got to use Wi-Fi, there are many inexpensive options to plug into a USB port that will give you really, really good speeds for as low as $20, and that gives you the latest and greatest AC Wi-Fi. So no, there's no Wi-Fi built into it, but it doesn't need it. As far as processor, let me just briefly mention, I don't want to put that there, I'll just set this here. Yes, this motherboard supports multiple processors. I've got the i7-6800K here. Some people are bound to ask, what about a higher end processor, or what about Haswell-E, the predecessor to this? Yes, it will work with all those. Yes, this motherboard works with Haswell-E. At the time I filmed this video, the predecessor to this chip was $35 cheaper. It's not worth buying. But if you find a deal on it for over $50 less, it might be worth buying, and that's fine. As far as the higher end chips, I don't personally recommend them for a variety of reasons, and that's beyond the scope of this video. But let me just say that I believe the proper combination is this motherboard for $250 and this processor for $420, the i7-6800K. You get 6 cores, 12 threads, 15 megabytes of level 3 cache. You get quad channel memory. You get 28 PCI Express lanes, which is 8 more than on Skylake. It is a great option for high-end enthusiasts that want to do a lot with their machine. So, did you like this video? Click like. Did you not? That's okay too. Remember to subscribe to my channel. It's the big, huge red button right down there. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, those go in the section below the video description. Speaking of the video description, if you found this video helpful, if you found this useful and interesting to figure out what the features are and what comes on this board, if you find anything on my channel helpful and useful, please use the links in the video description below. Go check those out. I will have links to this motherboard and the processor to both Amazon and NewEgg. Use those links. They're affiliate links. They will help me out. I will be eternally grateful. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.